It was late, the kind of late when most of the building had already gone dark. Only a few floors still glowed faintly, like tired eyes refusing to close. Emily, the new intern, stayed behind that night, her laptop humming softly on a desk far too big for someone in her position. She told herself she needed to finish the reports. In truth, she just wanted to prove she could keep up in a world that never slowed down. Her heels clicked against the empty hallway as she went to refill her coffee. That was when she heard it. Voices, sharp and raised, coming from the corner conference room. No one was supposed to be here. Curiosity tugged at her, stronger than common sense. She slowed her steps, the voices clearer now, breaking through the heavy silence of the floor. Two men, older, familiar, their tones were low one moment, erupting the next. "You think you can hide this forever?" one voice thundered, the words dripping with anger. "If you say a single word," the other hissed, "we both go down, and so does this company." Emily froze, her heart knocking against her ribs. She knew those voices. One belonged to the head of finance, the other to the man everyone simply called the director. Men who shook hands in daylight, smiling for photographs, now spitting fire at each other behind closed doors. Her fingers trembled as she reached into her bag. The phone felt cold against her palm. She didn't even think. Not fully, just raised it, the lens catching a narrow view through the crack of the door. Her breath came shallow, the kind that fogs up glass, as the camera rolled silently. Then in the middle of the shouting, one of the men said something that made her blood run cold. "If this leaks, even that little intern will be finished." For a split second, Emily thought she had imagined it, but she hadn't. They were talking about her, about people like her, too small to matter, too easy to crush. She pulled her phone back, pulse racing. In her screen's reflection, she barely recognized her own face, wide-eyed, terrified but unwilling to stop recording. That was the night Emily stumbled onto a secret she was never supposed to hear. A secret that would force her to choose between silence and truth. And neither choice would leave her life untouched. Emily didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her small apartment couch, the city glowing faintly through her blinds, phone in hand. She must have replayed the video a dozen times, each time catching something new she had missed in the heat of the moment. At first it was just shouting, but then, beneath the anger, there were words that cut deeper. "The numbers won't balance," one of the men barked. "They don't have to balance if no one asks questions," the other shot back. Emily leaned closer, pressing the phone to her ear, as if the device could whisper a clearer truth. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't just office gossip, not some petty fight between executives. This was about money, big money, and the lengths they would go to bury it. Her thumb hovered over the pause button when she heard it again, the part she couldn't forget. "If this leaks, even that little intern will be finished." Her throat tightened. They weren't just talking about numbers anymore, they were talking about people like her, disposable, invisible, easy to silence. She dropped the phone onto the couch cushion, burying her face in her hands. Why hadn't she walked away? Why hadn't she pretended she heard nothing and gone back to her desk like everyone else? But when she looked back at the glowing screen, at the frozen frame of two powerful men ready to tear each other apart, she knew why. Because deep down, she couldn't unhear it. She couldn't unsee it. Her mind raced with questions she couldn't answer. If she deleted the video, would she be safe? Would she wake up tomorrow and pretend none of it happened? Or had she already gone too far, just by hitting record? The phone buzzed suddenly in her hand, making her jolt, a number she didn't recognize. She let it ring once, twice, before it stopped. Seconds later, another buzz, a text message. "We know what you have." Emily stared at the words, her chest tightening until it hurt. She felt the walls of her tiny apartment closing in. The city outside kept moving, cars humming, lights blinking, life carrying on as if nothing had changed. But for her, everything had. She pressed the phone against her chest, gripping it like it was both a weapon and a curse. For the first time, she realized this wasn't just about surviving her internship. She was holding something that could destroy people, or save them. And either way, it would destroy her too. The next morning, Emily dragged herself into the office, running on barely an hour of sleep. The bright lights overhead felt harsher than usual, and every sound, the hum of the copier, the shuffle of shoes against the tile, seemed sharper, like her nerves were tuned too tight. She tried to focus on the pile of spreadsheets waiting at her desk, but her hands kept trembling over the keyboard. Her phone, tucked deep in her bag, felt heavier than it ever had before. Halfway through the morning, as she carried a stack of files to the storage room, she caught something that made her blood run cold. By the elevators, a co-worker glanced at her, not in the casual, half-smiling way people usually did, but with a look that lingered, curious, almost suspicious. He quickly turned away, but the damage was done. Her mind wouldn't stop racing. Did he know? Did anyone? Back at her desk, she noticed a sticky note she hadn't written. In neat handwriting, 2 words: "Be careful." Her heart jumped. She looked around the office, but everyone else was typing, talking quietly, pretending as if nothing was out of place. She crumpled the note into her palm, fingers clammy, and forced herself to breathe. At lunch, she avoided the cafeteria, too afraid of bumping into anyone who might know too much. Instead, she sat alone on a bench outside, cold wind brushing against her face. She pulled out her phone, almost against her better judgment, and opened the video again. For the first time, she noticed something she hadn't heard clearly before. In the background, after the shouting, there was a quieter voice, one of the men muttering almost to himself. They'll never believe her. Her stomach twisted. It wasn't just numbers and lies anymore. Whoever he was talking about, it was her. The phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. No message this time, just a missed call. She stared at the screen until it went dark, her reflection faint in the glass. Inside, the office kept humming, the world pretending to be normal. But Emily knew better. The walls of her workplace, once just a place to prove herself, now felt like a trap. She wasn't just working late anymore. She was caught in something bigger, something that already had her name written in it. By the middle of the week, Emily felt like she was walking through water, every step heavy, every breath tight. She thought she could blend into the background, keep her head down, and nobody would notice. But she was wrong. Late that afternoon, her phone lit up with a message from the assistant at the front desk. "The director wants to see you." Her stomach dropped. She told herself it was probably routine. An intern asked to drop off reports, maybe help with some notes. Still, when she walked toward his office, her palms were damp and her knees felt unsteady. The door was already open. He stood by the window, suit jacket draped over the chair, his tie loosened just enough to look casual. When he turned to her, he didn't look angry, he looked friendly, too friendly. "Emily, right?" His voice was smooth, practiced. "You've been working hard, people notice that." She nodded, unsure if she should sit down or stay standing. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. "You know," he continued, leaning against the window ledge, "this company values loyalty above all else. Talent matters, but loyalty, that's what keeps people here. That's what gets them promoted." Emily forced a smile, but her throat was dry. She could feel where this was going, even if he hadn't said it outright. "You're young," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "You've got a bright future ahead of you, and I'd hate to see something small get in the way of that." Her fingers dug into the fabric of her skirt, holding tight. Then came the twist she had been dreading. He lowered his voice, almost conspiratorial. "Whatever rumours you've heard, whatever nonsense people whisper, it's noise. We keep things in-house here. That's how we protect our own. Do you understand?" She swallowed hard. I think so." He smiled as if she had given the right answer. "Good. Stay focused. Do your work. And when the time comes, I'll make sure you're not just another intern. You'll have a place here." Her chest ached. The offer wasn't just a promise. It was a warning dressed in kindness. As she left the office, the fluorescent lights in the hallway buzzed overhead, but she barely noticed. Her mind was spinning. For the first time, she understood. This wasn't just about survival. It was about choosing who she wanted to be. Someone who stayed quiet and safe, or someone who risked everything by speaking up. She pressed her phone tighter in her bag, the hidden video burning like a secret she couldn't put down. By Friday, the office felt different. The air was thick, like everyone was breathing the same secret, but no one dared to name it. Conversations stopped when Emily walked into a room. Smiles seemed tighter, eyes more watchful. She told herself she was imagining it, that it was just the weight of the video in her bag making her paranoid. But then, in the quiet hum of the afternoon, she saw something that shattered that hope. She had gone to the records room to file a set of invoices. Normally it was empty, the kind of place interns could hide in for a moment of peace. But this time, she wasn't alone. One of the senior analysts stood there, hunched over a computer. Papers were spread across the desk, and his hands moved quickly, almost frantically. Emily froze at the doorway. He didn't notice her at first. His face was pale, his forehead damp as he clicked through files on the screen. She realised what he was doing only when she saw the folder names disappearing one by one. He was deleting records. Her breath caught. A whole section of financial reports vanished from the system right before her eyes. He finally looked up, and when his gaze met hers, the blood drained from his face. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then he snapped the laptop shut, gathered the scattered papers, and brushed past her without a word. His shoulder hit hers hard enough to make her stumble. The door slammed behind him, leaving the room silent except for the faint buzz of the lights overhead. Emily stood frozen, the weight of what she had just witnessed pressing down on her chest. The rumours weren't just rumours. The fight she had recorded wasn't just an argument. People were covering tracks, erasing evidence, making sure nothing ever left this building. Back at her desk, she couldn't shake the image of his panicked face, his trembling hands. She felt her own hands shaking as she pulled her phone out, scrolling to the video again. It wasn't just her against two men anymore, it was her against a whole system built on silence. Her screen lit up with another message, no name, no sender, just a single line. Some things are better forgotten. The words blurred as her vision stung. She looked around the office, at people typing away, pretending it was just another ordinary day. But Emily knew nothing about this place was ordinary anymore. And if she didn't decide what to do soon, she wouldn't just lose her job. She might lose herself. That Monday stretched on like a storm cloud. Emily moved through the office quietly, trying to keep her head down, but the tension followed her everywhere. Every phone ring made her jump. Every closed door sounded like it was meant to shut her out. By late afternoon, she got the message. The head of finance wanted to see her. She tried to steady her breathing as she walked down the hall. His office door was closed, the blinds drawn. When she stepped inside, the air felt heavy, and he didn't bother with polite greetings. "Sit," he said, and she obeyed, her legs stiff beneath her. "You're not stupid," he began, his voice low but sharp. "You've been paying attention. But smart people survive by keeping quiet. That's how they last in this business." Emily swallowed hard, gripping her hands together in her lap. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Whatever you think you saw, whatever you think you heard, it doesn't exist. And if it ever leaves this building..." He let the words trail off, the silence louder than any shout. "So do you." Her pulse hammered in her ears. He wasn't dangling promises like the director had. This was a threat, plain and cold. "Delete it," he said, almost casually. "Do it now, and this conversation never happened." Emily's phone felt like it was burning a hole in her bag. She forced herself to nod, though no words came out. When she left his office, the hallway felt longer than it ever had. Her reflection in the glass walls looked pale, older, as if she had aged a year in the span of a few minutes. She didn't go home right away. Instead, she lingered in the building long after most of the staff had gone, unable to face her empty apartment. She sat at her desk, pretending to shuffle papers, her thoughts running in circles. That was when she noticed the faint glow from the break room down the hall. Someone else was still here, and without knowing why, her feet carried her toward it. The rest of the week crawled by, each day heavier than the last. Emily moved through the office like a shadow, careful not to linger in hallways, careful not to meet the wrong pair of eyes. Still, the weight of the video pressed on her, a constant reminder in the back of her mind that she was holding something far bigger than herself. On Thursday evening, long after most of the staff had left, she found herself in the break room pouring a stale cup of coffee just to stay awake. She wasn't alone. At the table by the window sat Mr. Harris, a man who had worked in the company longer than anyone else she knew. His hair was white, his suit wrinkled, and yet his eyes carried a sharpness that hadn't dulled with age. "You look tired," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. Emily forced a smile. "Long week." He studied her for a moment, then leaned back in his chair. "You're not the first one to look like that in this place." Something in his tone made her pause. "What do you mean?" He gestured for her to sit. Hesitant, she lowered herself into the chair across from him. "This company," he said quietly, "has a way of chewing people up and spitting them out. I've seen it happen more times than I can count. People who asked too many questions. People who thought the truth mattered more than the paycheck." Her chest tightened. "What happened to them?" He gave a bitter laugh. "They're gone. Not dead, if that's what you're thinking. Just erased. Fired without warning. Blacklisted so no one else would touch them. Some moved away, some never found work again. It's like they never existed." Emily's hands curled around her coffee cup. The warmth didn't reach her fingers. Mr. Harris lowered his voice even more. 10 years ago, I saw something like what you're carrying now. There was another intern, just like you, bright, hopeful, thought she could make a difference. She caught wind of a deal that wasn't clean. She tried to speak up. Emily leaned forward, her heart pounding. "What happened?" He looked at her with eyes that suddenly seemed older than ever. She was gone within a week. No one spoke her name again, and the papers that could have saved her burned. For a long moment, the room was silent, except for the hum of the vending machine. Then Mr. Harris slid a thin folder across the table. The paper inside was yellowed, the edges frayed, but the names and numbers were still visible. "I kept this," he said. "I don't know why. Maybe because I couldn't forget. Maybe because I knew someone else would need it one day." Emily stared at the folder, her pulse quickening. She hadn't told him about the video, hadn't breathed a word, and yet somehow he knew. Her throat felt tight as she whispered, "Why are you giving this to me?" His gaze didn't waver. "Because I'm too old to fight, but you're not." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, the folder warm beneath her trembling hand. She had come into the break room for a cup of coffee. She was leaving with proof that the darkness in this company wasn't new, it was a pattern. And now she was part of it. The next morning started like any other. The elevator ride up, the ding of phones, the clatter of keyboards. But something was off. There was an empty desk near the corner where Sarah usually sat. Sarah had been one of the few people kind to Emily since her first day. They weren't close friends, but Sarah always saved her a seat in the cafeteria, always whispered reminders when Emily looked lost in meetings. And now her chair sat pushed back, her computer dark. Emily asked around casually, trying not to sound desperate. "Hey, do you know where Sarah is today?" A co-worker shrugged without looking up. "She's gone." "Gone?" "Yeah," he said flatly, tapping his pen against his notepad. "Fired. Packed up last night. They said it was performance issues." Emily's stomach dropped. Performance issues. Sarah had been one of the sharpest in the department. She never made mistakes. Later that afternoon, as Emily walked through the lobby, she saw Sarah by the revolving doors, clutching a cardboard box of her things. Their eyes met. Sarah gave a weak smile, the kind that said more than words ever could. And as she passed, she slipped a folded piece of paper into Emily's hand. Emily didn't open it until she was alone in the restroom, her heart hammering as she unfolded the note. 3 words, written in shaky ink. "They know, careful." Her knees nearly gave out. She leaned against the sink, gripping the edge to steady herself. Sarah hadn't been careless. She hadn't been fired for mistakes. She had been silenced. Tears stung her eyes, not just from fear, but from guilt. She wanted to run after Sarah, to apologise for whatever role she might have played just by existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. But it was too late. The doors had already closed behind her. Back at her desk, Emily sat stiff, the note hidden in her pocket. The office buzzed with fake normalcy, people tapping away on keyboards as if nothing had changed. But she felt the loss in every breath. That night, in her apartment, she pulled out the folder Mr. Harris had given her and laid it next to her phone. 2 pieces of evidence, one old and one new. Proof that the company thrived on silence, proof that silence came at a cost. Her phone vibrated again, another message, this one colder than the rest. "You're next if you don't let it go." Emily stared at the words until her vision blurred. Sarah's empty desk, the folder of forgotten truths, the video still glowing on her screen, it all pressed down on her like a weight she couldn't escape. For the first time, she whispered aloud the question she had been too afraid to ask herself. How much am I willing to risk? By Saturday evening, Emily couldn't keep the weight of it to herself anymore. Her apartment felt too small, her walls too close. She walked to a coffee shop a few blocks away, the kind with chipped tables and the smell of beans roasted too long. She picked the corner seat, opened her laptop and stared at a blank draft for what felt like hours. The video was still on her phone. The folder from Mr. Harris was tucked in her bag. Sarah's note burned in her pocket like a brand. She knew she couldn't carry it all alone. Finally, she typed the first words. "I have something you need to see. It's not safe to explain here." Her finger hovered above the send button. The bell over the door jingled and Emily's heart jumped. She looked up, expecting she didn't know what. A man had walked in, tall, in a dark coat, but he didn't look at her. He ordered a coffee, sat near the window, pulled out a paperback. She forced herself to breathe. Not everyone was watching her. Not everyone was a threat. But then her phone buzzed. A new message. "Careful who you talk to." The blood drained from her face. She glanced up again. The man by the window was reading, not even facing her. No one else in the shop seemed to notice her at all, and yet somehow, someone knew. Her chest tightened. She slammed the laptop shut, stuffed it into her bag, and left money on the table. The cool night air hit her as she stepped outside, but it didn't calm her. Every sound felt louder, the rumble of traffic, the scuff of shoes on the sidewalk behind her. She walked faster, weaving through the crowd, until she reached the subway station. Only then, pressed among strangers, did she finally let out the breath she'd been holding. Back in her apartment later, she sat on the couch, heart still racing, and opened the draft again. This time she didn't hesitate. She added one more line, "Meet me tomorrow, I'll bring proof." And with trembling hands she hit send. The message was gone, out of her control now. For the first time in days she felt a strange mix of fear and relief. The choice was no longer just hers to carry. But when her phone buzzed again, another unknown number lighting up her screen, Emily realised she had just crossed a line there was no going back from. Sunday night was quiet, too quiet. Emily sat in her apartment with the curtains drawn, the folder from Mr. Harris spread open on the table beside her phone. The video glowed on the screen, frozen on the faces of two men locked in fury. Tomorrow she was supposed to meet the journalist. Tomorrow everything could change. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing all day. Unknown numbers, short cold messages. Delete it, forget it, walk away. Each one made her stomach twist tighter. She pressed the device flat against the table, as if holding it still might silence it. She thought of Sarah, walking out with a cardboard box and a warning written on a scrap of paper. She thought of Mr. Harris, carrying a truth too heavy for him to fight alone. She thought of herself, just an intern, someone who wanted nothing more than to prove she belonged. Her phone lit up again. 5 words filled the screen. "Delete it or lose everything." Emily's hand trembled as she unlocked the screen. One swipe could erase it all, return her to safety, let her pretend none of this had ever happened. But her reflection stared back at her in the glass, pale and worn, and she realised silence wasn't safety, it was surrender. Her chest rose and fell in uneven breaths as she opened her email instead. The draft was still there. She attached the video, her finger hovering over the send button, her body shaking with fear. The phone rang once more, the vibration rattling against the table, demanding her attention. She closed her eyes. "No more silence," she whispered, and she pressed send. The screen went dark. For a moment, the room was still. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware of the storm about to break. Emily sat there, empty and full at the same time. She had done it. But a question lingered in the quiet, one she knew the world would answer for her soon enough. Was she brave, or was she reckless? In the end, Emily's story reminds us of something larger than one company or one secret. Silence can feel safe, but it often comes with a cost. Sometimes the hardest choice isn't between success and failure, but between living quietly in fear, or risking everything to stand for what's right. So here's the question for you. If you were in Emily's place, holding the truth in your hands, would you keep it hidden to protect yourself, or would you let it out no matter the consequences? Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. We'll see you in the next one, right here on Rain Inside.